By the time Nadia Kowalczyk realized what she'd done, there were 47 black SUVs parked along Rue Principale, and a man in a charcoal overcoat was standing in the snowstorm outside her front door like he owned the entire street. But that was the next morning. Before all of that, there was just the storm, and the man bleeding out on her porch steps, and the single worst decision she ever made, which also happened to be the only one she couldn't take back. The ice storm that hit Saint-Bruno-de-Montarville that Thursday night in February was the kind that meteorologists give names to after the fact, once they've tallied the damage. It came down hard and fast, the kind of freezing rain that turns every surface into a mirror, that makes the roads disappear and the trees crack like rifle shots. Nadia had come home from a 12-hour shift at the Clinique Sainte-Hélène, with salt still crusted on her boots and a tension headache she hadn't been able to shake since noon. She was a second-year nursing student doing her clinical placement, which meant she spent most of her days being responsible for things that genuinely mattered: IV lines, wound assessments, patient charts, and most of her evenings eating cereal over the sink and falling asleep on her textbooks. She was 26, practical by necessity, and not given to dramatics. She heard it before she saw it. A low sound, almost animal, coming from the direction of the front steps. She'd already hung up her coat, already taken off her boots. She stood in her hallway in her socks for a moment, telling herself it was the storm, that ice did strange things to old wood, that the houses in this neighborhood were all over a century old, and they groaned when the temperature dropped. She told herself that for about 30 seconds. Then she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. He was curled against the railing of the porch, one arm braced against the post, the other pressed flat against his side. He was wearing a suit, a dark charcoal suit that was absolutely wrong for the weather, and there was blood on his shirt, spreading out from beneath his hand in a shape that Nadia recognized because she'd seen it enough times in the R. Internal pressure, external wound. His face was turned to the side, cheek almost touching the icy railing. His breathing was shallow and audible, even over the sound of the sleet. Nadia stood in the doorway in her socks and thought, "Call 911. And then she looked at the blood and thought, "He won't last long enough for them to arrive." She grabbed him under the arms and dragged him inside. He was heavier than he looked, which was saying something because he was not a small man. She got him as far as the entryway, then made herself slow down and think. She was trained for this, or being trained for it. She checked his airway first, tilted his chin, felt his breath against her wrist. Then she peeled back his jacket and his shirt, and she saw the wound, a clean puncture, low and left of center, already packed with something, fabric maybe, or gauze. Someone had already tried to stop the bleeding, which meant someone else knew he was out here, which meant Nadia's front porch was not where this had started. She made herself not think about that. She got him onto the floor of her living room. She went to the kitchen and came back with her first aid kit, and then went back again for the dish towels, and then the spare blanket from the closet. She worked in the same focused, deliberate way she'd trained herself to work on shift, the way her clinical supervisor called efficient effect management, which mostly meant you put the feeling somewhere else for a while and dealt with what was in front of you. She applied fresh pressure. She checked his pulse twice. It was there, fast but steady. He made a sound once when she repositioned him, a bitten-off sound that meant he was closer to conscious than she'd realized. "Hey," she said, "can you hear me?" Nothing. She covered him with the blanket and sat back on her heels and thought about 911 again. She had her phone in her hand. She had already unlocked it. That was when she saw the ring. It wasn't flashy, just a plain silver band with a crest on it, a stylized V over two crossed lines, the kind of symbol that shouldn't mean anything, except that Nadia had grown up in a house where her uncle had told her once, very quietly, never to do business with anyone wearing that crest. Her uncle Zbigniew had been a very careful man who never explained why he knew the things he knew, but he'd always been right. She had been 12 when he told her, and she had not forgotten. She set her phone face down on the coffee table. She sat beside him for a long time, listening to the ice hit the windows, thinking about everything she knew about this kind of thing, which was not much, and everything she'd have to do if she called the police, which was a lot, and then what might happen to her if she did, which she couldn't calculate at all because she didn't have enough information. Outside, the storm was getting worse. The power flickered twice and she lit 2 candles on the mantel, just in case. The man on her floor breathed in and out with the careful steadiness of someone whose body was working very hard to stay alive. His name, she found out eventually, was Cale Vanthorpe. She found it because around 2 in the morning he opened his eyes, focused on her face with some effort, and said it. Just his name, like a reflex, like whatever protocol he normally operated under had shorted out, and the only thing left was the most basic identifier, Cale Vanthorpe. His voice was low and precise, even half unconscious. He had an accent she couldn't place, somewhere between British and something older, and his eyes, when they finally focused, were an unremarkable light brown that somehow landed with more weight than they should have. "You're stable," Nadia told him. "For now. You lost a lot of blood. I've done what I can, but you need a hospital." "No hospital," he said. "I'm not asking. No hospital." He shifted, and the effort it cost him was visible. "Who are you? The person whose porch you almost died on." He looked at her for a moment. Something moved across his face that wasn't quite an expression. "You should have left me there. You should have been more careful," Nadia said. "Do you want water or not?" He said yes to the water. That was something. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the armchair across from him with a blanket over her lap, and her phone on the cushion beside her, and she watched his chest rise and fall, and she tried to figure out what she'd gotten herself into. The rational thing, the obvious thing, would have been to call emergency services the moment she opened that door. Instead, she had dragged a stranger into her house, treated his gunshot wound with supplies meant for hiking blisters, and now she was sitting across from him watching him sleep while an ice storm dismantled the city outside her windows. She had a clinical practicum at 7:30. She had a pathophysiology midterm in 2 weeks. She had a landlord she owed February's rent and a sister in Halifax who called every Sunday, and none of that felt like it existed anymore, not even a little. Around 4 in the morning, she fell asleep without meaning to. She woke up to thin grey light coming through the blinds and Cale Vanthorpe sitting upright on her floor with his back against the couch watching her. "You slept," he said. "You look better," she said, because he did. His colour had evened out and his eyes were clear. "You took a risk," he said, "sleeping while a stranger was in your house." "You're welcome," Nadia said, "for saving your life. And then, you're a nurse, student. You know what you're doing well enough." She stood up, straightened the blanket, tried to feel normal. "I'm going to make coffee. Don't move, quickly." She was standing at the kitchen counter, staring at the coffee maker, trying to remember what a regular morning felt like when she heard the sound. It was low at first, more vibration than noise, and she thought it was a truck on the main road. Except that the ice storm had made the roads impassable, and there shouldn't have been trucks. Then it got louder, and then it became recognizable as engines. A lot of them. And then it became something she didn't have a word for. She went to the front window and looked out. The street was white and still, the ice overnight having coated every surface in that particular February way that made everything look sealed, preserved. And down the full length of it, as far as she could see in either direction, were black SUVs. Not a few. Not a convoy. She counted and stopped counting somewhere past 30, and they were still going, stretched out along Rue Principale like a funeral procession that had made a wrong turn, except that the men standing beside them. And there were men standing beside each one, in dark overcoats with earpieces, were not mourning anything. They were waiting. The one at the front of the line was standing at the edge of her driveway. He was taller than the others, with silver at his temples and the kind of stillness that meant he was used to people coming to him. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at the street, like he was surveying it, assessing it, deciding something. Nadia's coffee maker beeped behind her. She went back to the living room. There are a lot of vehicles outside. Cale Vanthorpe had already heard them. He was standing, which he shouldn't have been, not yet, one hand flat against the wall for balance. His face was very still. "How many?" he said. I stopped counting at 30. Something crossed his face that she thought might have been relief, which seemed wrong given the circumstances. "They found me. Are they going to come in?" "Not unless I tell them to." Nadia looked at him. "You're going to tell them to, aren't you?" "Nadia." He said her name like he'd had it for a while, which he hadn't, which meant he'd gotten it some other way. "What I'm about to tell you is going to change things. I want you to know that I'm aware of that." She sat down on the arm of the sofa. "All right. My family controls a significant portion of the trade infrastructure in this region. The ports, the logistics, the systems that move things across the border without paperwork." He watched her face as he said it. "You understand what I'm telling you. I understand exactly what you're telling me," Nadia said. "I grew up in Saint-Bruno. I'm not naive. Last night, one of my people put a bullet in me," he said. "Someone I trusted for 11 years. His name is Patrice Renault, and he works out of the Verdun office, and before last night I would have put him on a list of maybe 6 people in the world I was certain of." He paused. "I was wrong about that, and so you ended up on my porch." "My car went off Chemin des Moulins. I came in on foot. I was trying to get to the main road." Nadia thought about her uncle and his careful silences. She thought about the ring. She thought about every decision she'd made in the last 8 hours, every one of which had been some variation of not yet, not yet, not yet. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I need to make a call. My men outside. They'll want to come in. They'll want to secure the house and then move me." He looked at her steadily. "You've done nothing wrong. Helping someone who's injured on your property is not a crime. That's a careful way of saying some things. I'm a careful man." "You got shot!" "I was careless once," he said. "It won't happen again." She let him use her phone. She watched him make 2 calls in French and one in something that might have been Polish, his voice low and precise, his posture straightening incrementally as he spoke. The injured man on her floor becoming, visibly, someone else entirely. She had seen this in the hospital sometimes, the way a person could switch registers, the way her attending surgeon became a different human being, the moment he walked into a procedure room. Authority wasn't a quality, she had decided. It was a frequency. You were either on it or you weren't. Cale Vanthorpe was very much on it. When he was done, he handed the phone back. "They're going to come in," he said. "About 6 of them. They won't bother you. They're going to search my house. Yes, and there's nothing I can do about that. You could have called the police last night," he said. "You chose not to. I think you understood on some level that this was where choosing that would lead. I didn't know this specifically." "No, but you knew it wasn't simple." She had known that. She had known it from the moment she saw the ring. The men who came in were professional to the point of being impersonal. They moved through her house in a pattern that was clearly practiced. The 2 upstairs, 2 through the kitchen and back, 1 staying near the door. The 6th one, the tall man she'd seen in the driveway, the one with the silver temples, came directly to Cale. He spoke to him in rapid, low French, and the conversation had the texture of something that had been interrupted and was being resumed. His name, Nadia gathered, was Edouard, and he was something between a second-in-command and an older brother in terms of the dynamic, which was to say he was clearly worried and doing a very controlled job of not showing it. He looked at Nadia once, a flat, measuring look that lasted about 2 seconds. Then he said something to Cale in French that she didn't entirely catch, just the end of it. Elle a risqué. She risked something. Cale said something back that she also didn't catch. Edouard nodded and didn't look at her again. Nadia went to the kitchen and made the coffee because she needed something to do with her hands. She stood at the counter and poured 2 cups and thought about her practicum at 7:30, which she was obviously not going to make. She thought about who to call. She thought about the fact that she hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch break, a granola bar she'd consumed standing up in the med room between assessments. She found the bag of bread in the freezer and put 2 slices in the toaster. Edouard appeared in the kitchen doorway. "We're going to need you to come with us," he said in accented but precise English. Nadia turned to face him. "No." He blinked. It was a small blink, controlled, but she caught it. "Mademoiselle, I'm a nursing student with a clinical placement starting in 3 hours," Nadia said. "I treated your boss's gunshot wound with my own supplies, in my own house, in the middle of an ice storm. I did not call the police. I kept him warm and stable all night, and now I'm making coffee and toast." She turned back to the toaster. "I'm not going anywhere." Edouard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's not optional. Then I'd like to hear Mr. Vanthorpe say that." Another pause. Then Edouard left. A minute later, Cale came to the kitchen doorway. He was steadier than he should have been, which told her he was operating on some combination of adrenaline and stubbornness. He looked at the toast. He looked at her. "You don't follow instructions," he said. "I follow the right ones," Nadia said. "Sit down before you fall down." He sat down at her kitchen table. She put a cup of coffee in front of him. He wrapped both hands around it and was quiet for a moment, and she could see something in his expression that she didn't think many people got to see, a brief unguardedness, like a window opened for just a second before it closed again. "I need you with me," he said finally. "Not as a prisoner, as someone I trust. You don't know me. I knew you didn't call the police within the first 10 minutes of finding me. The rest I can work out. That's not a basis for trust." "In my experience," Cale said, "it's one of the better ones." Nadia ate her toast. She thought about Patrice Renault, whoever he was, and what it meant that someone had tried to kill Cale Vanthorpe and come close enough to succeed. She thought about the 47 SUVs on her street. She'd counted properly now. 47, she'd gone back and looked, and what it meant that they were all waiting for one word from one man sitting in her kitchen. She thought about her uncle Zbigniew saying, "Never do business with anyone wearing that crest," and how she wasn't doing business exactly, and how he'd probably say that didn't matter. She thought about the way Cale had looked at her when he was semi-conscious, and said his name like a reflex, like a last reliable thing. "If I come with you," she said, "I need to be back for my shift on Monday." "Done," he said, "and I need to call my clinical supervisor." "Done." "And I'm not part of this," she said. "Whatever this is, I'm a person who helped someone injured. That's all. That's where it starts and stops." Cale looked at her for a long moment. Outside, she could hear the SUV engines idling, low and patient, the whole long line of them waiting. The ice storm had stopped some time before dawn, and the morning was very bright and still, the way the world gets after a bad night, scrubbed clean and almost unrecognizable. "Of course," he said, and something in the way he said it made her think he knew, already, that it wouldn't stay that simple. But he said it anyway, and she appreciated that, the courtesy of it, the way he let her keep the version of the story where she was still just a bystander. He made another call. 5 minutes later, Edouard appeared in the doorway and told them the car was ready. Nadia looked around her kitchen. The coffee maker was still on. The 2 remaining slices of bread were sitting on the counter. There was a smear of blood on the hallway floor that she hadn't gotten around to cleaning up, and her spare blanket was on the living room floor, and somewhere in all of this she'd lost a full night of sleep and probably her reputation for making sensible choices. She turned off the coffee maker. She picked up her coat and her nursing bag, the one she always had packed for placement, and she thought, "This is a mistake." Then she thought, "It might also be the only honest thing I've done in a long time." Cale was in the doorway, watching her. He looked like a man who had spent years learning to wait for things without showing the cost of it. "Ready," he said. Nadia pulled on her coat. "Don't make me regret this," she said. He didn't say she wouldn't. She registered that, the precise shape of what he didn't promise. And she went out through her front door into the hard, bright February morning, into the long corridor of black SUVs and stone-faced men, into a world she had been standing at the edge of her whole life without quite knowing it. Behind her, the door swung shut on the quiet house, the cold coffee, the blood on the hallway floor. The world she'd known locked itself away. Whatever came next was already beginning.